Hello, this is your host, Renata Ortega. Welcome to today's episode of the Cycle Breaker and Changemaker podcast. This podcast is all about how to break free from negative generational cycles in order to create meaningful, lasting changes. For helpful tools and answers to your most pressing questions, be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Cycle Breaker Changemaker. I look forward to helping you on your cycle breaking and change-making journey. I promise you will find nothing more rewarding than this. In today's episode, I will be discussing an introduction to triggers. These can be emotional, mental health, or psychological triggers. It is important to understand that not all strong emotional reactions are a trigger response. If you are grieving the death of a loved one, it is appropriate to have intense emotional and physical feelings. Those feelings are safe and should not be reduced or changed. What I will be addressing today is when your trigger response is very significant, when the event the trigger is in response to is not actually that significant. I will be looking at why the response may not be appropriate for the situation at hand. Trauma can lead to triggers because a traumatic event leaves the victim feeling completely powerless, sometimes even leading to dissociation in order to preserve oneself because of the intense emotional pain that the experience may cause. This is why you may experience a trigger response that seems as if it has come out of nowhere. It, in fact, comes out of a very important place. It means that now you are able to look at and address the pain. So, what exactly is an emotional, mental health, or psychological trigger? A trigger of this kind is what occurs when either a person, object, or a memory results in very intense negative emotions. Triggers are rooted in past traumatic experiences. These emotions may be overwhelm, panic, anger, withdrawal, tears and crying, or extreme defensiveness. The physical symptoms of a trigger can include a fast-paced beating heart that comes on quickly and leaves quickly, shallow breathing, breaking out in sweats, panicked or anxious or unsafe feelings, and a response that is personal to you, which could be a hurting stomach or nausea. It is important to know that you can experience triggers outside of the time when the actual trigger presents itself, which can be extremely puzzling. Triggers are uncomfortable and can become debilitating if not dealt with in a healthy way. As I explained in episode 3, our brain is hardwired to protect us. We have evolved so very much, but we still continuously scan for threats. This can make our reaction to something that looks like, feels like, or smells like a previous threat result in a full-blown trigger. While the existence of the trigger reaction is at its historic base a helpful response, it needs some refining to make it appropriate for what is happening in the present. If you think you may be experiencing trigger responses, please only discuss these within the realm of a trusted relationship. You do not want this information getting into unsafe hands because you need help to heal from this. What you do not need is for triggers to be used against you. Here are situations that can occur to someone and result in intense trigger responses. Loss of control and loss of independence. Feelings of helplessness. Disapproval or criticism. Feeling unwanted or unneeded. Feeling smothered or too needed. Insecurity. Betrayal. Being ignored and disapproved. Having your belief system challenged. Rejection. Unfair and unjust treatment. So, how do someone's actions contribute to triggers, and how does this create a negative cycle? Triggers are a result of cause and effect and can come from a traumatic situation that has happened to you. The one thing that all triggers have in common is that they form in response to an unexpected event. If a trigger continues and is not understood, it can result in unhelpful responses rearing their ugly heads at extreme intensity and frequency. They can also occur at unhelpful times and in ways that leave you feeling depleted and helpless. It is important to remember what I have said in episodes 3 and 4. These responses are thoughts and feelings. Remembering this will help to take the power away from them. Thoughts and feelings can feel intense and snap you back to prior events, but they cannot hurt you. They cannot touch you. They are thoughts and feelings that your body is hardwired to produce. Here is my story and how triggers have impacted me as an adult. When I was a young adult, I would experience rapid panic onset, a racing heart, and sweaty palms. These increased in severity to panic attacks that seemed to come out of nowhere and in relation to nothing. I was so frustrated with the unpredictability of my emotions, and I truly did not understand what was going on. This became impossible to navigate on my own. I needed to understand what was happening to me and why. I remember people telling me, "You are here right now and you are safe. Nothing is actually happening to you." However, I would feel completely terrified and like I was going to die. I am not going to minimize the feelings I experienced because it is important for you to know that if you experience responses at this level, you are not alone. At first, I truly thought these responses that I would often feel in my body before I felt them in my mind were completely random. After working with a therapist, I began to see it was the opposite. They made complete and logical sense. That was extremely important to me to understand because it meant that it was something I could learn about and something that I could work on. I had minimized the abuse I had endured for years and years out of survival. But once I started to look at what had actually happened to me, it began to make sense that certain people, phrases, sounds, and so on would terrify me. I would either have a strong panic reaction, or I would completely shut down and become quiet and introverted, which is the complete opposite of my normal disposition. One extremely helpful piece of advice I was given is that nothing comes up in your memory or in your body that is something that you cannot handle. It can feel this way, but your body and mind are truly incredible. Your past will not present itself until you are ready to process it. Another very helpful piece of advice I have received is that healing from trauma can come in waves and in cycles. You can think that you have dealt with something, and then more can come up, and at different times in your life when significant events happen, such as entering into a serious relationship or having a child. This is really important to keep in mind so that you do not feel completely caught off guard. I remember feeling so irritated and annoyed with my triggers because I thought I had already dealt with them. I was tired of them rearing their ugly heads. But I soon learned that there was no use fighting them. I had to look at them and manage them in order to move forward from them. So what do I recommend to correct this course of negative triggers? Step 1. Give the trigger some acknowledgement. You can name it, assign it a color or a picture, whatever works for you. Accepting that a trigger exists will make it something tangible that you can work with. It also begins one of my most favorite processes mentioned in episode 2. It begins the process of getting the trigger out of your head and also begins to remove its power. Step 2. Start to pay attention to and make a note of how you respond to triggers. This is where I really recommend that you make a list, a physical list that you can look at and hang on to. How do you feel the trigger? Where do you feel it? Are you shutting down? Is your mind going blank? Are you experiencing stomach aches? You will begin to see that your response is mostly the same each time. This will allow you to start to recognize what is going on and know that this feeling is appropriate, but appropriate in the past. Let the feelings come and go without any judgment. You do not need to do anything with the responses during this step. Step 3. Get grounded. This means do whatever will help you come back to the present. There are many ways of doing this, and you need to do what works best for you and comes to you most easily and naturally. This step will take practice and trial and error, but once you figure out what works best, it is an incredibly powerful tool. Try meditating or going for a walk. You can try counting 5 things that you can see, counting 5 things that you can hear, counting 5 things that you can taste, and counting 5 things that you can touch. You could also try progressive muscle relaxation or parasympathetic breathing. Here is my experience and how I've implemented the steps mentioned earlier to lead to a positive outcome in my own life. If you are finding none of my grounding suggestions are working for you, you may consider investing in professional help in order to help cultivate your emotional regulation skills. I was so far gone down the trigger response hole that this is what I needed. Once I did that, though, I had a toolkit, and I never went down that trigger response road ever again. After working hard on myself, I started to recognize when I would respond to a perceived threat and shut down, feel my heart racing, and so on. I started to say out loud to those I trusted clearly and assertively, I am feeling an anxious trigger response, and I need help remembering that I am in the present. I do believe that most people do genuinely want to help others, so giving them clear, concise instructions will help them help you. You may need someone that you know you can call to talk to. You may need a physical hug. Maybe you need to see some nice pictures or receive some hilarious jokes. It is important to explain to those close to you that you trust that you are having these experiences, and to do this when you are in a calm mindset, because you will be able to logically explain what is going on and the steps that need to happen to help you calm down. When you are experiencing the intense feelings, it can be impossible to clearly communicate what you need. After time, I started to feel the triggers coming on. They didn't come on so suddenly and out of nowhere anymore. I began to look at them and say something along the lines of, I feel you, and I see you. I stopped battling the triggers head on. I gave myself a break and some much-needed compassion. I learned how to set up boundaries to avoid what was triggering me. I learned to say no to situations that were causing me pain and discomfort. I want you to know that you do not need to live your life in the pain that triggers cause. I have healed from my triggers, and you can too. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Cycle Breaker and Changemaker. I would love to hear from you and to receive your feedback. Remember, you can reach me on Instagram or Facebook at Cycle Breaker Changemaker. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts in order to help me continue to help you. I am looking forward to having you join me for the next episode. Until then, please take care.